Hey everybody, I'm the Drink Pro, and today I'm reviewing the 13-year-old Wild Turkey Distiller's Reserve. What's up everybody, Kyle the Drink Pro here with you yet again. Thank you so much, as always, for liking, commenting, subscribing, sharing this video with your friends. Everything you guys do to support the channel is amazingly helpful, and I want to be the first to thank you and say Happy Thanksgiving. That's what I'm thankful for. This video should be coming out right before you're about to gorge yourself on some wonderful Thanksgiving food. Maybe a little bit extra before for my Patreon viewers who are going to see this video the night before. By the way, check out the Patreon if you want to get some cool extra content, some opportunities for bottles, and some great exclusive merch. Speaking of merch, check out the shirt. We've got Drink Pro merch coming on Cyber Monday. That's this coming Monday. You can get your hands on this shirt and much more. I've got sweatshirts, I've got t-shirts, I've got all kinds of interesting stuff actually. Take a look, thedrinkpro.com. That's thedrinkpro.com. Easy website to remember. If you watch The Drink Pro, go to thedrinkpro.com. Now you may notice that I've already got the whiskey poured in a glass. Well, I had a critical camera error. So we're trying this again. Hopefully I don't have another one, or I'm going to keep filming and keep drinking. But I haven't tasted it yet. We got the error out of the way early, and now we can get into the normal video making process. Today I am drinking Wild Turkey Distiller's Reserve 13-year-old whiskey. Why 13? Well, it's kind of an interesting story. Many of you might not know this, but Wild Turkey 101 used to be an age-dated product. It was actually a 12-year-old product up until 2012 when they dropped the age statement. Now I think Wild Turkey 101 is around 7 or 8 years. I'm not totally certain about that, but there's a significant change. You know, it dropped almost half of its years, and so people were kind of upset about that. Now it appears people in Japan may have been particularly upset by this dropping of an age statement because 2 years later, in 2014, we see the first release of Wild Turkey Distiller's Reserve, and this is the 13-year age-dated product. A couple differences that are important to note. First and most obvious, it's not 101. The proof is actually quite low on this. It's 91 proof. So it's not really going to compare in some ways to the Wild Turkey 101 products. That's actually why I've brought this Russell's Reserve. This is a 10-year product at 90 proof, which I think will be a much more interesting comparison to the 13-year 91 proof product. By the way, the number 13 is actually lucky in Japan, which is why they did this release at 13 years old. One other important piece of information is that the Wild Turkey Distiller's Reserve is being pulled from the lower floors of Warehouse B. At least the 2014 version is, we're certain. 2016, that isn't actually expressed precisely on the back of the bottle. The back of the bottle in 14 says Warehouse B. The back of the bottle in 16 says of certain warehouses. So I don't know if they changed warehouses, if they just became less specific with their language, but 2014, we are certain, comes from the lower floors of Warehouse B. Now, why does that matter? Well, Warehouse B has sort of a unique climate compared to some of the other Wild Turkey warehouses. It's got more circulation, it's got a higher elevation, and it's got lower temperatures. That will definitely change how the whiskey is affected by the elements. Warehouse B actually makes very little whiskey that comes into the United States. Most of the whiskey from Warehouse B is exported into foreign markets, which is why the Japanese got the Warehouse B whiskey. I'm not sure why that is. I haven't had the chance to sit down with the Russells and ask them, but that's what's going on. Perhaps the most obvious thing that's fun about this whiskey is that it's an older whiskey. 2014, while it's not that long ago in real life time, it actually is relatively old for a whiskey to get your hands on today. Most whiskeys are getting swiped up almost instantaneously, and the idea of an old dusty bottle of Wild Turkey is pretty uncommon. All right, as I mentioned before, due to video error, I've already poured out the Wild Turkey 13. Let's go ahead and pour a little Russell's Reserve, and we can do a side-by-side and just see how they differ. I suppose just so you guys can have some verification, I'll pour a little bit more Wild Turkey 13 Distiller's Reserve into this glass, so you know it's coming out of the sample bottle. By the way, big shout out to Mark Goldman for the sample. I appreciate it, man. He's got some other cool stuff he sent me that I'm going to be reviewing before the end of the year. All right, let's get into this nosing. Now, the one with my logo on it is going to be the Wild Turkey 13-year, and the one with no logo is the 10-year product. By the way, I'm going to have a limited release of these Drink Pro glasses. The second run is coming soon, and I should be able to ship them before Christmas. That's what the distributors have told me. So get your pre-order in now. I'll put some information in the description to tell you about pricing, and you might have a very fun Christmas with a little bit of Drink Pro. Wow, I'm amazed how different these two pours are. They really are completely different animals, which surprises me maybe more than it should. You know, they're made to be different kinds of products. There is a 3-year difference. They're coming from different warehouses. But man, you wouldn't even know they were from the same whiskey producer if you didn't already know that they were Wild Turkey. I just get tons of sweet aromatics out of this 13-year. I'm getting butterscotch, I'm getting honey, I'm getting vanilla, maybe a little bit of caramel. And the baking spices are really nice too. I'm getting a little bit of cinnamon, probably mostly cinnamon, maybe a hint of nutmeg, but not very much. Maybe a touch of ginger as well. But it's a little bit more graham crackery. This actually has a really nice sweet tobacco note. That's a note that I don't find often, but when I do, I really like it. Sweet tobacco, maybe a hint of coffee. Yeah, those earthy spices are wonderful. I think some people might read that as leather. But for me, it's not deep enough to be leather. It's a lot softer. The coffee is almost non-existent. It's just barely there. But the really noticeable tobacco note, to me at least, is wonderful. But don't get me wrong, the predominant nose on this is sweet. It's sugary, it's ooey gooey goodness. I also get a ton of fruit in this. I'm getting oranges, lemons, cherries. A lot of berry notes, maybe blackberry, maybe raspberry, maybe even strawberry. Ooh, I'm also getting some sort of like candied fruit quality. Maybe like dried apricot? No. Figs, not dried apricot, figs. Very sweet. I'm not getting a whole lot of floral note, maybe just a hint of like a cinnamon toasted almond, but it's pretty quiet. But I'm also surprised how little wood I'm getting. There's just no oakiness on the nose of this. Gotta fix my mustache, hold on. I think by the next year it's gonna be waxed up. We're going full mustache. COVID mustache is coming. Oh, that's just such a beautiful nose. All right, let's compare that to the Russell's 10-year. Now, first off, way thinner, not nearly as full and creamy and sugary. It's definitely still sweet, but the rye spice shows up a bit more, and all of the sweet aromatics are turned way down. It's not nearly as full-bodied on the nose. I get rye spice, I get maybe like a simple syrup kind of sugar, a very narrow sweetness. The other thing that's kind of interesting is this is much more floral. I'm getting almost a potpourri note, maybe a hint of geranium, maybe a hint of rose. It's very floral to me. I don't get the tobacco or the leather or any of those earthy spices on this nose either. I get a lot more of the aromatic spices like a mint, maybe even like a eucalyptus. Yeah, definitely get that black tea because it's like black tea and then the fruit note is almost this sort of citrus addition to the tea. It's like a lemon zest. Maybe a little bit of like a fresh green apple as well. Okay, although I smelled the 13-year first, I'm gonna taste it second because it's slightly higher proof and it's slightly older. I wanna make sure I give a full shot, a full chance to the 10-year Russells, although I kind of don't think it's gonna hold up very well. It's very nutty in the mid-palate and the finish. That's the first thing that stands out to me. Oh, and the spice lingers. It's got a nice long finish. That herbal rye spice vibe kind of keeps sticking around and lingers for a while. Maybe a touch of black pepper. It's pretty good. The sweetness up front's really quiet though. You maybe get a touch of like creme brulee creamy sweetness, but it's super soft, super quick disappearing. And then right away, you almost get into this sort of bitterness. It's this nutty bitterness and a little bit of a woody bitterness. You definitely have tingling on the tongue. The pepper is becoming more and more prominent the more I sip it. Ooh, and interesting, as I keep sipping it, I actually start to get more leather on the nose. Sometimes that will happen. After you taste something and you go back to the nose, you'll find different notes. The leather is starting to show up, which at first I didn't get at all on this pour. Yeah, it's a fine dram in its own right. I don't know that it's my favorite. That bitterness that's in the mid-palate, it's kind of accompanying the woody and nuttiness. It's a little too bitter for me to be a personal favorite, but let's see how that compares to the 13-year Distiller's Reserve. Wow, that is so much smoother. It's sweeter, and it's so much smoother. It's crazy how smooth that is, actually. Wow. Oh my gosh. So sweet. See, now this whiskey does something I really like. I get a lot of the same notes on the nose and the palate. That always makes me smile. It's super sweet, it's creamy, it's got butterscotch, it's got vanilla. This is a good pour. Thanks, Mark. My one criticism, I guess, of this pour is that It's beautifully, wonderfully sweet up front. All these great candy-esque notes. It's got a lot of fruit on the nose. It doesn't really show up on the palate. Maybe a hint of orange and a hint of cherry, but they're very, very subtle. But there's no finish on this. If you're a fan of that spicy, high rye, wild turkey thing that's really common right now, today, you're not getting that in this pour. I mean, after you pass through that super sweet start on the palate, then mid-palate you get a little bit of a walnut kind of vibe. You get a little bit of some sort of candied fruit, maybe a fig, but it's super subtle again. And then nothing. It's just dead. It just dies. There's no pepper. There's no herbs. There's no spice. The finish is just almost non-existent. You know, Mark was telling me about this pour when he sent it to me. He said he thought it was okay. I think it's better than okay. I think it's a really good whiskey. It's a great example of what wild turkey used to taste like. The older turkeys that I've tried very much remind me of this, but this one hasn't been sun-kissed by time, which is what I think happens. I've had several whiskeys that were from the 70s and 80s where they have this almost aged, almost literal dusty quality to the palate. Sometimes even this metallic note that's almost like tasting a still, which is weird. But this one doesn't have any of those, but it has that super sweetness that I really like and that people seek out from those old pours. And much like all the old pours that I've had, the finish is relatively quiet. It's interesting to see how those palates have changed over time, and I wonder if that's a function of the whiskey production process or a function of modern palates wanting more oomph. Certainly with high-proof products, we see a lot more today than we used to, and that would speak to me of a function of people wanting that oomph. So are they doing this on purpose to modify the palates? Is this just hard to make this whiskey that's this sweet and this smooth to drink? Who knows? But I know that I really enjoy it. I'm going to keep drinking it, and you guys keep drinking like professionals. Cheers.